Diversity and Inclusion, History and Roadmap.
The journey towards inclusion and accommodating diversity started years back in the United States in around the mid-20th century. The history of inclusion in Australia is quite young, began 20 years ago, and started with those with disabilities, and it kept widening to accommodate the increasingly diverse student population.
However, previous research found that there are inconsistencies in accessing education and in the outcomes of students as well as in the disproportionate representation of students from different groups.
Australia is a society at risk of becoming increasingly unequal and segregated unless something has changed. More specifically, Australia now sits equal fourth out of the 36 countries in the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) for having one of the most segregated school systems, with the educational attainment gap between students from advantaged backgrounds and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. However, progress is possible.
In the School of Education, where students are taught to be future educators, we need to consider and acknowledge that there are still aspects of exclusion rooted in the system as a whole and in the practice. In your teaching, for example, you will encounter those who have learning disabilities. You will need to keep them visible with a real connection to the rest of the class.
In your class, you will encounter students who are grouped and organized around their cultural identities, and this would evolve the racial climate on campus. You will need to maintain everyone participates in discussions and activities in more multicultural groups rather than segregated groups.
When you become an educator, a student might come to you raising concern about exclusion. You will need to act responsibly and do not turn blind eye and provide a resolution if you can, with goodwill.
To conclude, inclusion is everyone's responsibility. We, as educators, need to advocate practices of inclusion and provide students with all the access and support they need for positive student experiences and quality outcomes.
These are some references that were used to prepare this presentation.
Thank you for everyone's participating in this internship program.